I need to explain something before I start, because if I don't frame this correctly, you're going to think this is a ghost story about a motel. It's not. I don't believe in ghosts. I didn't believe in ghosts before the Lyle Motel, and I don't believe in them now. What I believe in, after everything that happened, is that there are systems operating in this country that most people never encounter. Quiet systems, administrative systems, systems with budgets and employee handbooks and laminated rule sheets, systems designed to manage things that shouldn't exist but do. And the only reason you've never heard of them is that the people who run them are very, very good at hiring the kind of person who doesn't talk to anyone. People like me. My name is Jack. That's not the name on my birth certificate, but it's the one I've been using for the last 4 years, so it's the one that matters. Before that, I went by something else, and before that, something else again. I'm not a criminal. I don't owe anyone money. I'm not avoiding an ex or a warrant or a debt collector. I just learned a long time ago that names are useful mainly as tools, and I prefer to pick tools that fit the job I'm doing, rather than carrying the same one everywhere. I'm 34 years old. I've been working night shifts at isolated locations since I was 26. That's 8 years of empty parking lots, quiet corridors, humming generators, and the particular kind of darkness that collects in places where no one is expected to be awake. I've done overnight security at a mothballed semiconductor plant in Arizona. I've done graveyard shift maintenance at a closed state park in Oregon. I've manned a weather monitoring station on a stretch of prairie in Kansas, where the nearest human being was 11 miles in any direction. I once spent 4 months as the sole nighttime caretaker of a decommissioned juvenile detention facility in West Virginia that had been converted into document storage for a federal agency I'd never heard of. The filing cabinets went on for acres. The lights were on timers I couldn't override. Every 90 minutes, an entire wing would go dark for 6 minutes, and then come back on, and I never found out why, and nobody ever explained it, and I learned not to ask. That's the common thread. I learned not to ask. It's not that I'm incurious, I am actually, deeply. But curiosity in these jobs is like a leash with no collar. It pulls, but there's nothing to attach it to. The organizations that hire for these positions are structured to make questions impossible to direct. There's no HR department. There's no supervisor you can call at 3 a.m. to ask why the filing cabinets in Wing D smell like copper on Tuesdays. There's no employee portal, no company intranet, no chain of command that extends beyond the single point of contact who gave you the job. You work. You follow whatever instructions you are given. You cash the check. You move on. I found the motel job the way I find all my jobs, through a network of listing boards that cater to temporary, isolated, and overnight work. Some of these boards are public. Some require referrals. The one where I found this particular listing, exists on a part of the internet that's not indexed by any search engine I'm aware of. You access it through a URL that changes every few weeks, and the listings are coded in a way that takes some experience to decipher. I'm not going to tell you how to find it. Not because I'm protecting some secret, because I genuinely think you're better off not knowing. The listing said, night attendant, remote motel, Western Nevada, solo posting, duration, 14 nights. Compensation upon completion. The pay was listed as a flat sum and it was high. Not absurdly high. Not enough to scream danger, but enough to make me stop scrolling and read it twice. Enough to make me calculate how many months of expenses it would cover and feel the familiar tug of a number that's just generous enough to override caution. I responded. The confirmation came within an hour, which was faster than usual but not unprecedented. It was from a company called Pinnacle Staffing Solutions, which I'd never heard of. The email was sparse. A set of GPS coordinates, a date, a check-in time of 4 p.m., and a single instruction. Bring nothing you are not prepared to leave behind. That last part was unusual. I've received strange instructions before. One job told me to bring my own padlock and a specific brand of batteries. Another told me not to bring any device capable of recording audio, but bring nothing you are not prepared to leave behind. Had a different quality to it. It wasn't logistical, it was philosophical. It was the kind of thing someone says when they're trying to warn you without being explicit about what they're warning you against. I packed light. I always pack light. One duffel bag with clothes, toiletries, a flashlight, a multi-tool, a paperback, and a thermos. I left everything else in a storage unit in Reno, which is where I'd been staying between jobs. I drove south and west into a part of Nevada I'd never been to, through desert that got progressively emptier until the road I was on stopped appearing on my GPS. and the signal bars on my phone dropped to 0, and then to an X. The coordinates brought me to a 2-lane highway I didn't see on any map. The highway was in good condition. Smooth asphalt, clean shoulders, fresh lane markers, which struck me as odd for a road that apparently didn't exist. I followed it east for about 20 miles, through a landscape of low scrub and red rock and the occasional Joshua tree, standing alone against the sky like a figure watching traffic pass. Then I saw the motel. It appeared the way things appear in the desert, all at once, as though the heat shimmer had been hiding it until the last possible moment, and then stepped aside. One moment, empty highway. The next, a building. The Lyle Motel was a single-story, L-shaped structure with a flat roof and exterior corridors. 12 rooms, 6 on each wing, with dark green doors and brass numbers. A small office at the junction of the L, with a neon vacancy sign in the window that was turned off. A gravel parking lot, a dumpster, an ice machine, nothing else. No other buildings, no gas station, no town. The motel sat in the middle of the desert like a tooth in an empty mouth. There was one vehicle in the parking lot, a white pickup truck with no plates and no markings of any kind. It was parked in front of the office. I pulled in beside it and got out. The heat was immediate and aggressive. Late September in the Nevada desert is still capable of temperatures that make the air feel solid. I stood in the parking lot and looked at the motel and waited for someone to come out. And when no one did, I walked to the office and pushed open the glass door. The office was small and clean and intensely air-conditioned. There was a check-in counter with a bell, a rack of room keys on the wall behind it, a calendar from the current year with no dates circled or marked, and a man sitting in a folding chair reading a paperback Western. He looked up when I came in. He was in his 60s, lean and weathered in the way of someone who has spent decades in sun and wind. He had close-cropped gray hair, deep-set eyes the color of creek water, and hands that were rough and large and resting on the book with a particular kind of stillness. Not relaxed, but conserving energy, the way a man sits when he's been waiting for something specific, and it's just arrived. "Jack," he said. I hadn't told him my name. The listing hadn't asked for one. The confirmation email hadn't included one. But he said it with the flat certainty of a man reading it off a list. "That's right," I said. He closed his book and set it on the counter. He looked at me for a long moment, and I had the sense that he was evaluating something. Not my physical condition or my capability, but something more fundamental. My temperament, maybe. My threshold. "I'm Dale," he said. "I work days, you work nights. That's the arrangement." I asked him what exactly working nights at an empty motel in the desert entailed. He didn't answer right away. He reached under the counter and produced a manila envelope, the same type you'd find at any office supply store, and placed it on the counter between us. "The motel has 12 rooms," he said. "All of them are unoccupied. All of them are locked. Your job is to stay in the office between sundown and sunrise. You monitor the property. You follow the instructions in this envelope. You don't go into any of the rooms. You don't leave the property. You don't let anyone in." "Who would come?" I asked. "There's nothing out here." He looked at me and something moved behind his eyes. Not fear. Something older and more practiced than fear. The look of a man who has answered this question before and knows that the honest answer is not the helpful one. "Follow the instructions," he said. "That's the whole job. Do that and you'll be fine." He pushed the envelope toward me. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected, not from the paper inside, but from the lamination. Whatever was in here had been sealed in plastic, made durable, made to last. "I'm leaving at 5, Dale said. "Sun goes down at 6:42. You've got about an hour and 40 minutes to read that and get settled. There's coffee in the back, a cot in the storeroom if you need it, and a two-way radio behind the counter that's tuned to a dedicated frequency. Don't change the frequency." I asked him what the frequency was for, who was on the other end, what I was supposed to do if someone transmitted. "It's in the instructions," he said. And then he said something that I've replayed in my mind many times since, because it's the only moment where I saw the practiced calm break, just for a fraction of a second, like a crack in porcelain. He said, "Read all of them before dark. And Jack, the one about room 6, pay close attention to the one about room 6. Then he picked up his book, walked out of the office, got in his white truck, and drove east on the highway until the heat shimmer swallowed him. I was alone. I stood in the office for a few minutes, acclimating. The air conditioning hummed. The clock on the wall behind the counter read 4:23 p.m. Through the glass door, I could see the parking lot, the L-shaped building, and the desert beyond. The sun was still high but declining. The shadows of the motel were beginning to lengthen eastward across the gravel. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single laminated sheet, printed on both sides, and a smaller piece of cardstock with a hand-drawn diagram of the motel's layout. The diagram showed all 12 rooms: the office, the storeroom behind the office, the ice machine, the dumpster, and, this was new to me, a utility structure behind the motel that I hadn't noticed when I arrived. It was drawn as a small square set back about 50 yards from the rear of the building and labeled simply Station. I set the diagram aside and read the laminated sheet. At the top, in bold, Lyle Motel, Overnight Protocol. Below that, Pinnacle Staffing Solutions, Sector 4, Classification, Mandatory. And then a preamble identical in tone to every other set of rules I've ever received in jobs like this, but with a sentence at the end that I'd never seen before. The preamble read, "The following rules govern the overnight shift at the Lyle Motel. These rules must be followed without exception. Failure to comply will result in consequences that Pinnacle Staffing Solutions is not authorized to describe, reverse, or mitigate. By continuing to read this document, you accept full liability for your own well-being during the shift period." That last sentence was new, not the legal boilerplate. I'd seen that before. The phrase "by continuing to read," not by signing, not by showing up, by reading, as though the act of putting your eyes on the words was itself a binding contract. I kept reading, because of course I did. Rule 1. All exterior lights on the motel must remain on from sundown to sunrise. Every light. The parking lot light, the corridor lights on both wings, the light above the office door, and the sign light, even though the sign is off. If any exterior light goes out during the night, replace the bulb immediately. Replacement bulbs are in the storeroom. Do not allow any section of the exterior to remain dark for more than 5 minutes. Rule 2. The 12-room doors must remain locked at all times. Do not open them. Do not attempt to look through the windows. The curtains in all rooms have been drawn and sealed. If you notice that a curtain appears to be open, visible as a gap or a change in the light level behind the glass, do not investigate. Note the room number in the logbook and continue your shift. Do not approach the window of that room for any reason. Rule 3. Between 9 p.m. and midnight, the two-way radio may receive transmissions. The transmissions will be on the correct frequency. They may contain voices, tones, or ambient sound. Log the time and duration of each transmission. Do not respond. Do not pick up the handset. If a transmission directly addresses you, turn the radio to its lowest audible volume. Do not turn it off. The radio must remain on at all times. Rule 4. Once per hour, between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m., walk the exterior corridor of both wings. This is a visual inspection only. You are checking that all lights are on, all doors are closed, and nothing is present in the corridor that was not there during your previous inspection. If you find an object in the corridor that was not there before, regardless of what it is, do not touch it. Note its location and description in the logbook. It'll be gone by your next inspection. Rule 5. Between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., you may hear sounds from inside one or more of the rooms. These sounds may include knocking, conversation, television static, running water, or footsteps. This is expected. Do not acknowledge the sounds. Do not knock back. Do not press your ear to the door. Continue your inspection route at a normal pace. If the sounds stop when you walk past, that is normal. If the sounds intensify when you walk past, increase your pace but do not run. Return to the office. Rule 6. Room 6 is different from the other rooms. The door to room the 6th of May appear to be open during your nightly inspections. It will not be open. It will appear to be open. The door will look ajar, the interior will seem visible, and you may perceive light, movement, or a figure inside. This is not real. Do not approach room 6 when it appears this way. Do not look directly into the room. Continue walking past at a normal pace with your eyes on the opposite wall. If you look into room 6, if you see what appears to be inside, leave the corridor immediately and return to the office. Remain in the office with the door closed for at least 45 minutes. Do not perform your next scheduled inspection. Resume your normal routine on the following hour. Rule 7. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., the desert around the motel may become unusually quiet. No wind, no insects, no ambient sound. During this period, do not go outside. Remain in the office. If you are mid-inspection when the silence begins, complete your inspection without stopping and return to the office by the most direct route. During the silence, you may notice figures standing in the parking lot or on the highway. Do not count them. Do not look at them for more than a few seconds. They are visible through the glass door and the office windows. Close the blinds if necessary. Rule 8. If at any point during the night someone approaches the office on foot, a traveler, a motorist, anyone, do not open the door. Do not speak to them through the glass. The motel is not operational. No one should be arriving. If the person knocks, wait. They will leave. If they do not leave after 10 minutes, turn off the office lights and move to the storeroom. Wait there until your next scheduled inspection time, then resume your shift. Rule 9. At exactly 3:33 a.m., you will hear a phone ring. The phone is in the top drawer of the counter. It is a landline handset connected to no visible phone jack. The phone will ring 3 times. Do not answer it. After the 3rd ring, open the drawer, confirm the phone is still there. Close the drawer and note the time in the logbook. If the phone rings more than 3 times, or if it rings at any time other than 3:33 a.m., answer it. Say nothing. Listen. Hang up after 30 seconds, regardless of what you hear. Note the time and duration in the logbook. Rule 10. At dawn, when the first light hits the parking lot, walk to each room and confirm that all doors are closed and locked. If any door is open, genuinely open, not merely appearing open as described in Rule 6, do not enter the room. Lock the door from outside using the master key, which is on the ring behind the counter. Note the room number in the logbook. Tell Dale when he arrives. He will handle it. I set the sheet down and looked at the clock. 4:51 p.m. Less than 2 hours until sundown. There was a part of me, the practical, experienced 8 years of night work part, that processed the rules the way I always do, as operational parameters. Every isolated posting has its protocols. Some are rational, some are superstitious, some are vestigial remnants of incidents that happened years ago and got codified into procedure because nobody bothered to remove them. I've followed rules about not entering certain rooms, not responding to certain sounds, not looking at certain things. The specific content varies. The underlying structure is always the same. Here is a list of things that might happen, and here is what you do when they happen, and if you follow the list, the night will end and you will be fine. But another part of me, the part that has been doing this long enough to develop instincts I can't fully articulate, noticed something about the Lyle Motel rules that was different from any set I'd received before. The rules weren't preventive. They weren't telling me how to avoid something. They were telling me how to coexist with something, how to move through a space that was already occupied. The phrasing throughout, "This is expected. This is normal. They will leave," was the language of accommodation, of managed proximity. Whatever was happening at this motel at night was not being prevented or contained. It was being tolerated, and my role was not to guard the motel against it. My role was to be present while it happened and to not interfere. That distinction matters. A guard stands between the threat and the thing being protected. An attendant simply attends. And I was beginning to understand that what I'd been hired to do was attend. I spent the remaining daylight exploring the property. Not extensively. I didn't go near the rooms and I didn't walk out to the structure labeled station on the diagram. But I familiarized myself with the layout. The L-shaped building was exactly as it appeared. 12 rooms, 6 on each wing. The corridor ran along the exterior of the L, covered by an overhang but open on one side. Each room had a green door with a brass number, a window with heavy curtains drawn tight, and a wall-mounted light fixture above the door. The fixtures were the kind you see at budget motels everywhere. White ceramic with a single incandescent bulb, functional and ugly. I checked each bulb by switching them on at the breaker box behind the office. All 12 lit up, plus the corridor lights and the parking lot light. The effect was stark. The motel went from a dim, sun-bleached thing to a blaze of warm light against the gathering dusk. It looked almost inviting, almost like a place someone might actually stop for the night. Almost. I made coffee. I found the logbook, a standard composition notebook, black and white marbled cover, sitting on the counter beside the radio. I opened it. The logbook was more than half full. Different handwritings, different dates, stretching back at least 2 years. The entries were terse and procedural, the kind of notes someone makes when they're following a template. 8 p.m. inspection. All lights on. All doors closed. No anomalies. 9:47 p.m. Radio transmission received. Duration, 2 minutes 15 seconds. Static with intermittent tone. No voice. Did not respond. 11:30 p.m. sounds from room 4, footsteps, then conversation. 2 voices, both male. Indistinct, continued past at normal pace. Sound ceased upon my passing. These entries went on for pages, dozens of nights, logged by what I counted as at least 6 different people. The handwriting changed every few weeks, sometimes more frequently. None of the writers identified themselves. None left personal observations. The log was pure data, times, events, responses, until I reached an entry from about 7 months prior. The handwriting was different from the others, tighter, more controlled, but with a slight tremor, as though the writer was exerting physical effort to keep the letters steady. The entry began normally, 10 p.m. inspection, all lights on, all doors closed. And then, noticed something not in the rules. The ice machine is running, not the compressor, the dispenser mechanism, the sound of ice being dispensed into a container. Went to check. Ice was being dispensed into a bucket that was sitting on the ground in front of the machine. A plastic bucket, white, like a cleaning bucket. It was about half full. I did not put the bucket there. I have not seen it before tonight. The ice machine continued dispensing until the bucket was full, then stopped. I don't know what to do with this. It's not in the rules. Going to leave it. The next entry, same hand, next night. Bucket was gone when Dale arrived this morning. Asked Dale about it. Dale said it happens sometimes. Said don't worry about it. Said the ice machine does things that aren't in the rules because the rules only cover what's important. Said if something happens that's not in the rules, it's not dangerous. It's just residual. I asked him what that meant. He said, the motel has habits, old habits, like a body that still twitches after the nerve is cut. I don't know what that means either. The entries by this person continued for 3 more weeks, each one slightly longer than the last, slightly more personal. They noted patterns. The radio transmissions were more frequent on nights when the wind was still. The sounds from the rooms varied. Some nights only 1 or 2 rooms, other nights all 12. Room 6 appeared open on roughly 1 out of every 3 inspections, though never the same inspection 2 nights in a row. The silence period between 2 and 4 a.m. occurred every night without exception, and was always accompanied by figures in the parking lot, though the number varied. Then, 18 days into this person's tenure, an entry that was longer than anything before it. Something happened that I need to write down, even though the rules don't require it, and I don't know who reads this log or if anyone reads it at all. During the silence period tonight, I was in the office with the blinds closed, per Rule 7. I was sitting at the counter with the logbook and I was writing the previous entry, when I heard a sound that did not come from outside. It came from the storeroom. The door to the storeroom was closed. I had closed it earlier. The sound was a single clear tap, like a fingernail on wood. 1 tap, then silence, then, about 10 seconds later, another tap, then another. Rhythmic, spaced, like someone in the storeroom was tapping on the inside of the door slowly and deliberately to get my attention. I did not open the door. The rules don't mention the storeroom specifically, but the principle is clear. Don't respond to sounds. Don't acknowledge. Don't engage. I sat at the counter and I listened to the tapping for 47 minutes. I timed it. The taps never changed in speed or intensity. They were perfectly regular, perfectly patient. At 3:31 a.m., 2 minutes before the phone was due to ring, the tapping stopped. I waited. At 3:33, the phone rang. 3 times, as expected. I opened the drawer, confirmed the phone was there, closed it, noted the time. After that, the rest of the night was normal. But I need to record this. When I checked the storeroom the next morning, after sunrise, the room was exactly as I'd left it. Nothing moved, nothing out of place, except there was a faint mark on the inside of the door. Not carved, not written, just a mark in the dust. A small circle with a vertical line through it. I stopped reading. I set the logbook down and I looked at the storeroom door, which was 6 feet to my left and closed. Then I looked at the laminated rule sheet, still on the counter. Then I looked at the diagram of the motel that had come in the envelope with it. In the corner of the diagram, near the station structure behind the motel, there was a small symbol. I hadn't noticed it before. A circle with a vertical line through it. I'd seen that symbol before, years ago, at another job. The overnight security gig at the decommissioned detention facility in West Virginia, the document storage building, the filing cabinets that went on for acres. On the spine of every cabinet in Wing D, the wing where the lights went out for 6 minutes every 90 minutes, there had been a small label, white background, black ink. a circle with a vertical line through it. I'd assumed it was a filing designation, a category marker, an organizational code. Now I wasn't sure. I picked up the logbook again and turned the page to look for more entries from the same writer. There were 2 more. The first was brief. Night 19. Standard shift. No anomalies beyond the expected. Room 6 appeared open at 11 p.m. inspection. Did not look in. Sounds from rooms 3, 4, 7, and 9 between 11 and 1. Footsteps in all 4, conversation in 7. Phone rang at 3:33, 3 rings. This will be my last night. Replacement due tomorrow. The second was different. It wasn't an operational entry. It was a note, written at the bottom of the page in smaller script, almost hidden. To whoever comes after me, I don't know what this place is. I don't know what happens in the rooms at night, or what stands in the parking lot during the silence, or what lives in the signal that comes through the radio. But I've started to think it doesn't matter. The rules work. Follow them, and the night passes. That's all that matters. Don't try to understand. Understanding is not part of the job. But if you're like me, if you're the kind of person who takes work like this, who drifts between these postings and starts to notice that they rhyme, that the rules overlap, that the symbols repeat, then I want you to know that you're not imagining it. There's a structure, there's a system, and we're part of it whether we signed up to be or not. I've been doing this for 3 years, and the same company keeps hiring me, under different names: Pinnacle Staffing, Atherton Resource Management, Meridian Logistics Group. The names change, but the paperwork is the same, the fonts are the same, the classification codes are the same, and the symbol, the circle with the line, is always there. I don't know what it means, but I know it connects us. Everyone who does this work, every location, every set of rules. We're all nodes in the same network, and the network is managing something that exists across a geography much larger than any single posting. I'm telling you this because no one told me, and I spent 2 years thinking I was alone in it. You're not. You're never alone in it. That's the most frightening thing I've figured out. I closed the logbook. I sat in the office and listened to the air conditioning and the slow tick of the clock, and I thought about what I'd just read. I thought about the symbol. I thought about Atherton Resource Management, which I'd seen referenced exactly once before, not at the West Virginia job, but on a document I'd found tucked behind a circuit breaker panel at the Kansas weather station. A single sheet of paper, yellowed and brittle, with a header that read, Atherton Resource Management, Region 12, Threshold Maintenance Protocol. I'd assumed it was old, obsolete, someone's forgotten paperwork. I'd put it back behind the panel and thought nothing of it for 2 years. I was thinking about it now. The sun touched the horizon at 6:38 p.m. I watched it go from the office window, a red disc flattening against the desert floor, and the sky turned the color of a bruise, and the shadows of the motel stretched across the gravel like long dark fingers. And then it was gone, and the sky was the deep featureless blue of desert twilight, and I was on the clock. I checked the exterior lights, all on. I checked the radio, on, tuned to the correct frequency, silent. I checked the logbook, opened to a fresh page. I wrote the date and the time, 6:42 p.m. Sundown shift begins. All exterior lights on, all doors closed and locked, radio on, beginning first inspection at 8 p.m. Then I sat down and waited. The first 90 minutes were quiet in a way that felt intentional. Not the absence of sound, but the withholding of it. The desert at night should have had a soundtrack. Wind through scrub, the skitter of lizards, the distant call of a coyote. But there was nothing. Just the hum of the air conditioning, the buzz of the exterior lights visible through the windows, and the faint, almost subliminal crackle of the radio sitting in its cradle. At 8 p.m., I performed my first inspection. I stepped out of the office into the night air. The temperature had already dropped significantly. Desert nights do that. The heat radiating upward into a sky that doesn't hold it, and my breath was just visible in the light from the corridor fixtures. I turned right and walked the east wing first. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3, Room 4, Room 5, Room 6. Each door was closed. Each light was on. The corridor was empty. The curtains in each window were drawn tight, opaque, revealing nothing. My footsteps on the concrete walkway were the loudest thing in the world. I reached Room 6 and slowed. Not because of the rule. Not yet. Nothing was happening yet. But because of something I noticed about the door. It was identical to the others. Same green paint, same brass number, same deadbolt. But the threshold, the strip of metal at the bottom of the door where it met the concrete, was worn. Significantly more worn than the thresholds of the other rooms. The metal was rubbed smooth and bright, as though something had been passing over it with great frequency, as though the door to room 6 had been opened and closed thousands of times while every other door on the motel had remained shut. I noted it mentally and continued. Room 7 through room 12 on the west wing. All closed, all lit, all silent. I completed the circuit and returned to the office. I wrote, 8 p.m. inspection, all lights on. All doors closed, threshold wear noted on room 6. No other anomalies. At 8:47 p.m., a coyote howled. Just one, somewhere far to the south. A long wavering note that rose and fell and rose again. It was the most ordinary sound imaginable, and it made me flinch, because it was the first sound from outside the motel since sundown, and it broke the stillness like a stone through glass. And then the radio came on. Not with a crackle, not with a fade in. It went from silence to sound in a single instant, as though someone had flipped a switch. The sound was static but textured, layers of noise that shifted and overlapped like waves. Within the static, I could hear something that might have been a tone, a sustained note at a frequency just below music, and beneath that, something that might have been rhythm, not percussion, not anything produced by an instrument. A pulse, biological, slow and steady and deep. I picked up the pen and wrote, 8:47 p.m. Radio transmission begins. Static with underlying tone and rhythmic pulse. No voice. The transmission continued. I sat at the counter and listened and did not touch the radio. 3 minutes passed. 5. The tone shifted, rising in pitch by increments so small I wasn't sure I was hearing them until the cumulative change became undeniable. What had started as a low hum was now something closer to a whine, thin and metallic, and the pulse beneath it was quickening. Not dramatically, subtly, like a heartbeat responding to exertion or excitement or proximity. At the 9-minute mark, the static parted. That's the only way I can describe it. The layers of noise separated, created a gap, and in the gap there was a voice. It was not a voice in the way you're thinking. It had no gender, no accent, no emotional quality. It was a voice in the most reduced functional sense, a sequence of sounds organized to convey language, and what it conveyed was a list of numbers, spoken slowly with equal pause between each one. 7, 12, 3, 19, 4, 8, 15. Then the gap closed, the static resumed, the tone resumed, the pulse resumed, and then, at the 12-minute mark, the transmission ended. Same way it started, instantaneous, sound, then silence. I wrote, transmission ended 8:59 p.m. Duration, 12 minutes. Voice component at minute 9. List of numbers, 7, 12, 3, 19, 4, 8, 15. Significance unknown. I stared at the numbers. They didn't correspond to anything I could identify. Not room numbers. The motel only went up to 12. Not times, not dates, not any code I recognized. I circled them in the logbook and moved on. At 9 p.m., I performed my second inspection. Same route, east wing, then west. Same results. All lights on, all doors closed. Room 6 was just a door. No illusion, no tricks. I passed it and felt nothing except the awareness that I was looking for something that wasn't there yet. I returned to the office. At 9:34 p.m., the radio came on again. Same texture, same layers, but this time, no tone underneath, no pulse, just static, thick and formless for exactly 90 seconds. Then a voice, the same featureless assembly of phonemes, said a single word. My name, not Jack, my real name. The one on my birth certificate, the one I haven't used in 4 years, the one that isn't on any document connected to Pinnacle Staffing Solutions, or this job or any job I've taken under my current identity. The static continued for another 30 seconds and then ended. I sat very still. The pen was in my hand, but I didn't write anything. I was doing what I always do in moments like this, running the calculus. How could it know? The options were, someone at Pinnacle had access to information linking my aliases to my legal identity, which was possible, but would require resources beyond what a staffing company should have. Or the radio transmission was sourced from something that acquired information through means I couldn't explain. Neither option was reassuring, but only one of them was actionable. If it was a person with a database, there was nothing I could do about it tonight. If it was something else, something connected to whatever this motel was part of, then the rules applied. Rule 3 said don't respond. Rule 3 said if a transmission addresses you, turn the volume down. It didn't say addresses you by your preferred alias. It said addresses you, and it had. I turned the volume down, not off. The rules were specific about that. The radio must remain on at all times. I wrote 9:34 p.m. Transmission. Duration approximately 2.5 minutes. Voice component single word. Volume reduced per Rule 3. At 10 p.m., I performed my third inspection. This time, something was different. I noticed it on the east wing, between Room 3 and Room 4. An object on the ground, small, positioned precisely in the center of the walkway, as though placed rather than dropped. I stopped about 4 feet from it and crouched to look. It was a key, a brass room key, old-fashioned, the kind with a diamond-shaped plastic tag attached. The tag was green, matching the doors, and had a number on it in white. The number was 6. I did not touch it. Rule 4 was explicit. If you find an object in the corridor that was not there before, do not touch it. Note its location and description. It will be gone by your next inspection. I stood up, completed my inspection of both wings, all lights on, all doors closed, nothing else out of place, and returned to the office. I wrote 10 p.m. inspection. Object found in East Wing corridor between rooms 3 and 4. Brass room key with green tag, numbered 6. Did not touch. Per Rule 4, expecting removal before next inspection. I sat at the counter and thought about the key. A key to room 6, placed in the corridor. An invitation, or a test, or both. The rules said room 6 was different. The rules said room 6 would appear to be open. The logbook entries from previous workers confirmed it. And now a key to room 6 had materialized in the walkway, placed deliberately, positioned to be found. I thought about what the previous writer had said. Don't try to understand. Understanding is not part of the job. They were right. But they'd also said they spent 3 years doing this work and still didn't understand, which meant the desire to understand never goes away. It just gets managed, like any chronic condition. At 10:30 p.m., the sound started. It began with room 9, a television, not static, a program. I could hear the tinny cadence of a sitcom laugh track through the door, muffled but distinct. Canned laughter, the kind that was recorded in the 1970s and has been recycled through decades of television. The dead laughing at jokes they never heard. It played for about 2 minutes, then stopped. Then room 4, footsteps, heavy, deliberate, crossing the room from one side to the other, a pause, then crossing back, pacing. The footsteps had weight to them, the weight of a real person walking on a real floor, and they were accompanied by the creak of old floorboards, which was strange because the motel was built on a concrete slab. There were no floorboards. Then, room 11, water, a bathtub filling, the specific, unmistakable sound of water from a faucet hitting porcelain, and the gradual shift in pitch as the tub fills, and the water level rises and the sound deepens. This went on for a long time. 5 minutes, 10, longer than any bathtub should take to fill, and the pitch never reached a point where the tub would be full. It just kept filling. The water kept rising into a vessel with no bottom. I walked the corridor at 11 p.m. as scheduled. The key was gone. The walkway between room 3 and room 4 was empty. As predicted, I continued my inspection. The sounds were still happening. Room 9 had shifted from the sitcom to what sounded like a news broadcast, and room 4's pacing had been joined by a second set of footsteps, lighter and quicker, and room 11's water was still running. I also now heard sounds from room 2, a low conversation between 2 people, both female, speaking too quietly to make out words, but with the cadence and rhythm of an actual exchange. Pauses, responses, interruptions, the architecture of real conversation. I walked past each room at a steady pace as instructed. I did not slow down. I did not listen more closely than I could help, and the sounds, as I passed, did something that the rules had prepared me for, but that still made the back of my neck prickle. They responded to me, not by stopping, by shifting. The conversation in room 2 paused as I walked past, then resumed after I'd taken 3 steps. The pacing in room 4 stopped when I was directly outside the door and started again when I moved on. The television in room 9 changed channels. I heard the audible click of a dial turning as my shadow crossed the window. They knew I was there. They were tracking my movement through the corridor by the sound of my footsteps, adjusting their behavior in response, like performers aware of an audience. I noted all of this in the logbook with a hand that remained, to my moderate surprise, steady. 11 p.m. inspection. Sounds from rooms 2, 4, 9, and 11. Details logged above. Sounds responsive to my presence. Key from previous inspection no longer present. All lights on. All doors closed. I paused after writing all doors closed because that wasn't quite true. All doors were closed, but room 6 was not just closed. Room 6 was open. I had seen it at the far end of the east wing corridor during my inspection. The door was ajar, not wide open, cracked maybe 4 inches, revealing a sliver of the interior, and from that sliver came light, warm, amber light. The kind cast by a bedside lamp with a low wattage bulb. The light fell across the threshold and formed a narrow wedge on the concrete walkway, and in that wedge I could see the edge of a carpet, dark red, patterned, the kind you'd find in a motel room from the 1970s. I did not stop. I did not look in. I walked past with my eyes fixed on the opposite wall, exactly as Rule 6 instructed, and I did not turn my head, and I returned to the office and sat down and closed the door. But here is what I need to tell you, and I need to be precise about this, because precision is all I have. In the fraction of a second before I averted my eyes, in the involuntary flicker of peripheral vision that happens before conscious intention can override it, I saw something inside room 6, a chair, positioned facing the door, and in the chair, a figure, seated, motionless, facing the gap in the door as though it had been sitting there for a very long time, waiting for someone to walk past and look in. I didn't see details. I couldn't tell you if it was male or female, what it was wearing, what its face looked like. I saw only the shape, a seated human form, still as furniture, oriented toward the door with the precision of something that had been placed, rather than something that had chosen to sit. Rule 6 said if you see what appears to be inside, leave the corridor immediately. Return to the office. Remain for at least 45 minutes. Do not perform your next scheduled inspection. I was already in the office. I checked the clock. 11:09 p.m. My next inspection would have been at midnight. I would skip it. For 45 minutes I sat at the counter and did not go outside. The sounds from the rooms continued. I could hear them faintly through the office walls. The conversation in room 2 had gotten louder, though no clearer. The water in room 11 was still running. And from room 6, nothing, no sound. No indication that anything inside had changed or moved or responded to my presence. But the light. When I'd walked past room 6, the light from inside had fallen across the walkway. Warm, amber, inviting. The light of a room that was occupied and comfortable and waiting for you to come in. And now, sitting in the office, I could see through the glass door a faint glow at the far end of the east wing corridor. Room 6's light was still on. Its door was still open, waiting. At midnight, I stayed in the office, per Rule 6's instruction. To skip the next inspection, I used the time to look more carefully at the diagram that had come in the envelope. The motel layout was straightforward, but the station behind the building interested me. It was drawn as a small square, maybe 10 by 10 feet, set back 50 yards from the rear of the motel. A dotted line connected it to the motel, labeled path, and around the station the diagram showed a circle, not a structure, just a circle drawn in the dirt, or marked on the ground, with the same symbol at its center, the circle with the vertical line. I turned the diagram over. On the back in small printed text was a note I'd missed before. The station is not part of the overnight protocol. Access is restricted to authorized Pinnacle personnel. If you observe activity at the station during your shift, lights, sound, movement, log it but do not investigate. The station operates independently. Independently. That word stuck. It implied that the station was doing something, not just existing as a structure in the desert, but operating, running, functioning towards some purpose that I was neither informed of nor authorized to interfere with. I wanted to go look at it. I wanted to walk out the back of the office, cross the 50 yards of scrub, and see what was inside the small square building behind the motel. But the rules said don't, and the silence period, Rule 7, was approaching. Between 2 and 4 a.m., don't go outside. Whatever my curiosity was telling me, my survival instinct was louder, and my survival instinct said stay in the office and follow the rules. At 12:50 a.m., I resumed inspections. The light from room 6 was gone. The door was closed. The corridor was dark except for the wall-mounted fixtures, each one casting its small pool of light on the concrete. The sounds from the rooms had changed. Room 2 was silent now. Room 4's pacing had stopped. Room 11's water had finally stopped running. But room 7, which had been quiet all night, was now producing a sound I couldn't identify. A low, rhythmic thud, muffled by the walls but persistent. Not footsteps, not knocking. Something heavier, slower, like something large and soft being dropped repeatedly onto the floor from a moderate height. I didn't stop to analyze it. I walked past at a normal pace and completed my inspection, and went back inside. At 1 a.m., the second radio transmission of the night began. This one was different from the first two. No static, no tone, just a voice. Clear, close, intimate, as though the speaker's mouth was inches from the microphone. And the voice was not the mechanical, genderless assembly from earlier. This was a woman's voice, warm and specific and real. She was describing a room. The carpet is dark red, she said. The bedspread is brown, with a gold pattern. There's a lamp on the nightstand with a cream-colored shade. The curtains are drawn. The chair is by the door. There's a mirror above the dresser, and in the mirror, you can see the chair. And in the chair, the transmission ended. I sat at the counter with my pen hovering above the logbook, and a sensation in my chest that I can only describe as the physical manifestation of a door being opened that should have stayed closed. The woman had been describing room 6. The carpet, the lamp, the chair. The details matched what I'd seen in that fraction of a second glance through the open door, and she had been building towards something in the chair when the transmission cut off, as though whatever she was about to reveal had exceeded the bandwidth of what the radio was allowed to carry, or as though something had stopped her. I wrote 1 a.m. transmission, duration, approximately 45 seconds, female voice, clear signal, no static. Description of room interior consistent with visual impression of room 6. Transmission ended mid-sentence. Did not respond. I sat for a long time after that. The office was very quiet. The air conditioning had cycled off, and the only sound was the faint, subaudible hum of the radio at its lowest volume. The clock ticked toward 2 a.m., with the slow, heavy certainty of something counting down. At 1:55 a.m., I performed what I knew would be my last inspection before the silence window. I walked both wings quickly but thoroughly. All lights on, all doors closed. No objects in the corridor, no sounds from any room. The motel had gone completely quiet, as though whatever inhabited the rooms had drawn inward, retreated, pulled away from the walls and the doors in anticipation of what was coming. I returned to the office at 2:01 a.m. The silence began at 2:03. I know the word silence is already inherently superlative. Silence is silence. There aren't degrees. But what happened at 2:03 a.m. at the Lyle Motel was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of an opposite, an active, aggressive nullification of all audio. The air conditioning wasn't just off, it was mute. The clock on the wall, which had been ticking audibly all night, produced no sound. The radio, still on, still powered, emitted nothing. Even the sound of my own breathing seemed dampened, as though the air itself had lost the ability to conduct vibration. I sat at the counter and I felt the silence on my skin. It had a pressure to it, a physical weight, like being submerged in something thicker than air but thinner than water. My ears strained for input and found nothing, and the nothing was so complete that my brain began to manufacture its own sounds, phantom tones, half-heard whispers, the auditory hallucinations that the human nervous system generates when it's deprived of stimulus. I knew they weren't real, but knowing didn't make them quieter. At 2:11 a.m., I saw the first figure. It was standing in the parking lot, about 30 feet from the office door, visible through the glass. A human shape, upright, motionless, facing the motel. The exterior lights were still on, all of them, and the figure stood in the overlap between the parking lot light and the corridor light from the east wing, fully illuminated. I could see it clearly. It was a man, or it had the shape of a man, tall, thin, wearing what appeared to be dark clothing, pants, and a long-sleeved shirt, both black or very dark gray. His arms were at his sides. His posture was neutral, neither threatening nor relaxed, just standing. the way someone stands when they're waiting for a bus. Ordinary and patient and wrong. Wrong because his face was in shadow. Despite the lights were above and around him, illuminating his body, his clothes, his hands, but his face remained dark, as though the shadow was attached to it specifically, clung to it, refused to be dispelled by photons. Rule 7 said I might notice figures in the parking lot during the silence. It said don't count them. Don't look for more than a few seconds. Close the blinds if necessary. I looked for about 4 seconds, long enough to register the shape, the posture, the impossible shadow. Then I looked away. I didn't close the blinds. I should have, but I told myself I needed to be able to see the parking lot. I told myself it was a monitoring position, and I couldn't monitor with the blinds down. These were rationalizations, and I knew they were rationalizations, but I let them stand, because the alternative, sealing myself into a box without any visual information about what was outside, was worse than seeing things I didn't want to see. Over the next 40 minutes, more figures appeared. I saw them in my peripheral vision, materializing at the edges of the parking lot and on the highway beyond, standing, motionless, facing the motel. All of them had the same posture, the same proportions, the same impossible shadow where their faces should have been. I didn't count them. The rules said don't count, but I couldn't help noticing that they were arranging themselves in a pattern. They weren't clustered randomly. They were spaced evenly, forming what appeared to be a perimeter, a ring around the motel, equidistant, precise, like fence posts. I closed the blinds. I sat at the counter in the sealed, silent office and I stared at the logbook, and I breathed, and I waited. At 3:15 a.m. something happened that wasn't in the rules. The storeroom door opened, not quickly, not violently. It swung open the way a door swings open when someone pushes it casually from the other side. A slow, smooth arc, 6 inches, 12 inches, all the way to the wall. The hinges didn't creak, the door didn't slam. It just opened, as though the air pressure in the storeroom had shifted, or as though something inside had decided to stop being contained. I looked at the doorway. The storeroom was dark. The light switch was on the inside wall to the left, and I could see it from where I sat. A white toggle on a white plate, clearly visible in the spill of light from the office. The storeroom beyond the switch was black, not dim, black. The kind of dark that looks solid, that looks like something you could reach into and feel resistance. I remembered the logbook entry, the tapping, the mark on the inside of the door, a circle with a vertical line through it. Nothing came out of the storeroom. Nothing moved in the dark. The door stood open, and the dark stood there and the silence pressed down on everything. And I sat at the counter, 7 feet from the open doorway, and I felt something that I have felt only a handful of times in my life. Not fear, presence, the awareness, absolute and cellular, that I was not alone in the room. That something was in the storeroom, in the dark, and it was aware of me, and the open door was not an accident or a malfunction or a change in air pressure. It was a communication, an invitation. I did not go to the storeroom. I did not close the door. I sat and I looked at the open doorway and I understood, in the way you understand a word in a language you don't speak, not through translation, but through context, through tone, through the shape of the sound, that the dark in the storeroom was watching me, evaluating me, the same way Dale had evaluated me when I walked into the office 12 hours ago, measuring my temperament, my threshold. I stared back, not out of bravery, out of something more fundamental, the recognition that whatever was in the storeroom already knew everything it needed to know about me, my name, my history, my pattern of moving from place to place, job to job, rule set to rule set, the years of night work in empty buildings and silent landscapes, and the slow accruing awareness that all of it was connected. It knew, and the open door was not a test, it was an acknowledgement. You're one of us now. At 3:31 a.m., the storeroom door closed, same way it opened, slow, smooth, silent. It swung shut and latched with a soft click, and the room was sealed again. At 3:33 a.m., the phone rang. I opened the top drawer. The phone was there, a beige handset, 1980s vintage, cord coiled neatly, connected to nothing. It rang again, a real physical bell inside the handset, vibrating with each ring, not a digital tone, an analog bell, the sound of metal striking metal, and it was loud in the silence, shockingly loud, the first real sound in over 90 minutes. It rang a third time. Rule 9 said 3 rings at 3:33. Do not answer. Confirm the phone is there. Close the drawer. Log it. I watched the phone. The third ring faded. Silence returned. I waited, counting seconds in my head. 5, 10, 15. The phone rang again. A fourth ring. Rule 9 was explicit. If the phone rings more than 3 times, answer it. Say nothing. Listen. Hang up after 30 seconds. I picked up the handset and held it to my ear. For the first 5 seconds, nothing. Then breathing, not the slow, rhythmic breathing from the radio transmission earlier. Fast breathing, panicked. The breathing of someone who is terrified and trying to speak but can't form words. I heard their mouth open. I heard the wet click of a tongue against a palate. I heard the intake of breath that precedes speech. And then a voice. Not the mechanical voice from the radio. Not the woman who described room 6, but a new voice. Male, young, shaking. Said, "Don't go in the storeroom. Whatever you do, whatever it shows you, don't go in the storeroom." That's where the line went dead. Not silent, dead. The quality of sound in the handset changed from the open breathing hum of a live connection to the flat, total absence of a disconnected line. I held the phone for the remaining seconds, 30 total, as instructed. Then I hung up, placed the handset back in the drawer, closed it, and wrote 3:33 a.m. Phone rang 4 times, answered per Rule 9 protocol. Male voice, warning regarding storeroom. Connection severed mid-sentence. Duration of contact, approximately 12 seconds. I wrote it clinically. I wrote it the way the logbook taught me to write it. Time, event, response. Convert the inexplicable into data. File it. But my hand was shaking. Not a lot. Not enough that someone watching would have noticed. But I felt the tremor in my tendons, the low vibration of a system under stress, and I knew that the gap between my capacity to manage this and the intensity of what was happening was narrowing. The silence ended at 3:57 a.m., 3 minutes early. It ended with wind, a gust from the west that hit the motel like a hand, rattling the windows and pushing dust across the parking lot in visible clouds under the exterior lights. The clock resumed ticking. The air conditioning cycled on. The radio, still at low volume, emitted a faint hiss of static that sounded, after the silence, like music. I opened the blinds. The parking lot was empty. The figures were gone. The highway beyond was dark and vacant. The desert stretched away in every direction under a sky full of stars, and for a moment the Lyle Motel was just a motel, sitting alone on a road in Nevada, lit up against the night like a small defiance. I performed my next inspection at 4 a.m. Both wings, all lights on, all doors closed, no objects in the corridor, no sounds from any room. Room 6 was closed, dark, indistinguishable from the others. The motel was quiet. But something had changed. I felt it during the inspection, walking the corridor, passing each door. The motel was not the same as it had been when I started my shift. Something had shifted in the relationship between the building and whatever occupied it at night. The sounds, the figures, the open storeroom door. These weren't random events. They were a sequence, each one building on the last, each one a little closer, a little more direct, a little more personal. The radio had known my name. Room 6 had shown me its interior. The storeroom had opened for me. The phone had delivered a message meant for me. The motel was learning me. The way I was learning it, I completed the inspection and returned to the office. I sat at the counter and I waited for dawn. And while I waited, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I opened the storeroom door, not because I'd forgotten the phone call, not because I'd forgotten the warning. I opened it because the storeroom was part of the motel, and I was the night attendant, and if I was going to be part of this system, whatever it was, I needed to see what was in the room. The storeroom was small, 8 by 10 maybe. Shelves along 2 walls stocked with supplies, light bulbs, cleaning products, toilet paper, linens, a mop and bucket in the corner, a circuit breaker panel on the far wall, normal, mundane, exactly what you'd expect. Except for one thing. On the floor in the center of the room, someone had placed a binder, a thick 3-ring binder with a black cover, lying flat on the concrete. It had not been there before. I was certain of that. I'd checked the storeroom when I first explored the motel at 4:30 in the afternoon, 9 hours ago. There had been no binder on the floor. I picked it up and opened it. Inside were documents, printed pages, some typed, some photocopied from handwritten originals. The first page was a cover sheet, Pinnacle Staffing Solutions, network over VI, distribution, restricted. I turned the page. What followed was a list, a long list. Locations. Each entry included a code name, a geographic region, a brief description, and a status designation. I scanned the first several. LM, Lyle Motel, Sector 4, Western Nevada. Status, active. Classification, sustained manifestation. BF, Blackwood Forest, Region 7, Pacific Northwest. Status, active. Classification, threshold containment. CR, Cedar Ridge, Region 2, Appalachian Corridor. Status, active. Classification, acoustic anomaly. HL, Hollow Lake, Region 9, Northern Michigan. Status, dormant. Classification, submersion event. WT, Whitetail, Region 5, Ozark Plateau. Status, active. Classification, pattern migration. NV, North Valley, Region 11, Upstate New York. Status, active. Classification, recursive inhabitation. Deep, undesigned. Status, critical. Classification, the list continued for 3 more pages. 23 locations total. 23 postings across the country, each one managed by the same network, each one staffed by workers like me. Night attendants, overnight monitors, solitary shift workers following rules they didn't understand in places that shouldn't exist the way they do. I turned more pages. Behind the location list were documents that appeared to be internal correspondence, memos between unnamed personnel, referencing site conditions and manifestation patterns and worker retention rates. One memo, dated 14 months prior, discussed the increasing difficulty of recruiting suitable candidates for overnight postings and proposed expanding the referral network to include workers with prior experience at affiliated sites. Another memo referenced something called the Integration Protocol and stated that workers who complete postings at 3 or more network sites develop a measurable affinity that reduces the frequency and intensity of hostile manifestation events. It went on to say, these workers are not simply employees, they are components. Their presence modulates the activity at each site. The longer they stay, the more stable the site becomes. The network requires them. Components. We are components. The system doesn't just employ us, it uses us. Our presence, the specific quality of human attention that people like me bring to places like this, the willingness to sit alone in the dark and follow rules and not ask questions, is itself a mechanism of containment. We are the technology. The rules are just the operating instructions. I read for 20 more minutes. I learned things I'm not going to share here, because some of them were specific enough that I believe they constitute genuine danger to anyone who knows them. But I will tell you 3 things. First, the 23 locations on the list are not random. They form a geographic pattern. If you plot them on a map, they describe a shape. I'm not going to tell you what shape, but it's deliberate, and it's old, and it predates every organization that currently manages the network. Second, the Lyle Motel is not a motel. It was built as a motel in 1971, but it was purchased by a predecessor to Pinnacle Staffing in 1979, and has never served a single paying guest. The rooms were sealed from the inside. Whatever is in them was placed there intentionally. The sounds, the television, the footsteps, the conversations, the running water are not hauntings. They are echoes of a procedure that was performed in 1979 in each of the 12 rooms, simultaneously over the course of a single night. The binder did not describe the procedure. It simply noted that the residual acoustic signature is consistent with a binding event. Third, the storeroom is not a storeroom. Behind the circuit breaker panel, which is mounted on the far wall with 4 Phillips head screws, is a door. A small, narrow door, set into the wall at about knee height, painted the same color as the surrounding concrete. The binder said, access to the sub-motel chamber is forbidden to all overnight personnel. The chamber has been sealed since 1982. If the circuit breaker panel is removed, the door will be visible. Do not open it, do not touch it. The chamber is not empty. I put the binder back on the floor. I left the storeroom. I closed the door. I walked to the office counter and I sat down and I looked at the circuit breaker panel visible through the storeroom doorway. I thought about the voice on the phone. Don't go in the storeroom. That's where they what? Where they put something? Where they found something? Where they lost someone? I didn't investigate, I want you to know that. I did not remove the circuit breaker panel. I did not look for the door. I followed the rules as far as they went. And where the rules stopped, I followed the instinct that has kept me alive through 8 years of this work. The instinct that says, some doors are closed because what's behind them is not for you. At 5:45 a.m., the eastern horizon turned pink. I watched it through the office window, the slow infusion of color into a sky that had been black and indifferent for 12 hours. And I felt the night release its grip, not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually. Like a fist unclenching, the pressure eased. The weight lifted. The motel became a motel again. I performed my dawn inspection per Rule 10. Every door was closed and locked. Every light was still on. The corridor was empty. Room 6 was shut tight, its threshold worn smooth, its curtains sealed. Whatever had been inside, the chair, the figure, the warm amber light, was not visible, not audible, not present, or at least not presenting. Dale arrived at 6:30 a.m. Same white truck, same unhurried walk, same door opening without a knock. He looked at me. I looked at him. Anything I need to know? He said. I told him about the radio transmissions, the sounds from the rooms, the figures in the parking lot, the phone ringing 4 times. I told him about room 6. I did not tell him about the storeroom door opening on its own. I did not tell him about the binder. He listened to all of it with the same blank practice neutrality I'd seen the day before. When I finished, he nodded once and said, "Standard night. You did fine." I asked him about the station behind the motel. He looked at me for a moment longer than was comfortable and said, "That's not part of your posting." I asked him about the symbol, the circle with the vertical line. I told him I'd seen it before at other jobs in other states. I told him I thought it was a connecting element between postings that were supposed to be unrelated. He put his book on the counter and sat down in his folding chair and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not hostile, not afraid. Tired, maybe. The tiredness of a man who has been carrying something for a long time and has stopped noticing its weight. "How long have you been doing this work?" he asked. 8 years. How many postings? I counted in my head. 14. 15, counting this one. And how many of those had rules? I thought about it. Not all of them had formal rule sheets, but a significant number, maybe half, had some version of a protocol. Instructions that went beyond standard operating procedure into territory that couldn't be explained by safety regulations or institutional routine. Things I was told to do or not do that made no sense until something happened that made them make too much sense. 7, I said. Maybe 8. Dale nodded slowly. "Then you already know more than I'm authorized to tell you," he said. "But I'll tell you one thing, because you've earned it. And because you seem like the kind of man who's going to keep doing this work regardless. The symbol you keep seeing, the circle and the line, it's not a logo, it's not a brand. It's a marker. It designates sites within the network that are active. Sites where the boundary between what's on the surface and what's underneath is thin enough that it requires maintenance. Human maintenance. That's us. You, me, everyone who's ever worked a night shift at one of these places. We're the maintenance." He paused. Then, "You want to know what we're maintaining against. You want to know what's in the rooms and what's at the bottom of the storeroom and what the station out back is doing. And I understand that. But the answer isn't going to help you. The answer is that we don't know. Nobody in the network knows. The system was designed to function without understanding. It was designed so that people like us, people who follow rules, people who don't need to know why, could keep it running indefinitely. Because whatever is underneath these sites, whatever the boundary is holding back, it doesn't need to be understood. It needs to be attended. And that's what we do. We attend." He picked up his book. He opened it to his page. The conversation was over. I drove back to Reno that afternoon. I slept for 11 hours. I returned to the Lyle Motel at sundown and worked my second night and my third, and every night after that for the full 14-day contract. Each night was different in its details. The radio transmissions varied. The room sounds shifted. The figures appeared in different numbers and configurations, but the structure was the same. The rules held. The night passed. The sun came up. On my 6th night, I found a second object in the corridor. Not a key this time. A photograph, face down on the walkway outside room 9. I did not touch it. I did not turn it over, but I could see, through the back of the photo paper, the faint impression of an image. A group of people standing in a line. Outdoors. in what appeared to be a desert landscape. The exposure was dark and the details were indistinct, but the shape of the image stayed with me. On my 9th night, the storeroom door opened again during the silence window. This time, I saw something in the dark that I had not seen before. A faint luminescence, blue-white, coming from behind the circuit breaker panel. Not a light, a glow, as though something behind the panel was producing its own illumination. It pulsed slowly 3 or 4 times, and then faded, and the storeroom door closed. On my 12th night, the radio transmitted something I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Not a voice, not static. Music. A few bars of a melody played on what sounded like a piano, distant and slightly distorted, as though the recording was very old or the instrument was slightly out of tune. The melody was simple and recursive. It repeated the same 8-note phrase 3 times, each time with a slight variation, and then stopped. I wrote down the notes in the logbook using the only musical notation I know, which is rudimentary. I don't know the name of the melody, but it was familiar. I'd heard it before, not at another posting. In my childhood, it was a song my mother used to hum, a song I haven't thought about in 20 years, a song that should not exist on a radio frequency in an empty motel in the Nevada desert at 1 a.m. I did not react. I logged it. I followed the rules. I survived. On my 14th and final night, at 4:44 a.m., the phone rang. Not at 3:33, not 3 times. It rang once, at 4:44, and the single ring was different from any I'd heard before. Softer, almost gentle, the sound of a bell that has been rung not to alarm but to inform. Rule 9 said nothing about a ring at 4:44. Rule 9 covered 3:33 and the contingency of additional rings. This was outside the protocol. I opened the drawer. The phone was there. I picked it up. I held it to my ear. A voice. Female. The same woman who had described room 6 on my first night. Clear, warm, specific. She said, "Thank you for attending." Then, after a pause, "Your file has been updated. You are now eligible for priority postings across the full network. We recommend a minimum rest period of 3 weeks between assignments. Your next listing will be available on the board at the standard URL. The reference code will begin with deep." Another pause. Longer. The line was still live. I could hear the ambient hum of an open connection. Then she said, "You're doing important work, Jack. More important than you know. The boundary holds because people like you sit in the dark and hold it. Don't stop. Whatever you learn, whatever you see, whatever you begin to understand about the shape of the network and the nature of what's beneath it, don't stop. The moment the last attendant walks away from the last posting, the maintenance ends. And when the maintenance ends, the line went dead. I held the phone for a long time. I didn't count the seconds. I just held it, this beige plastic relic from a decade before I was born, connected to nothing, carrying a voice from nowhere. And I thought about what she'd said. The maintenance ends. And when the maintenance ends, she hadn't finished the sentence. She didn't need to. The weight of the unfinished thought was the answer. The absence of the ending was itself the warning. I left the Lyle Motel the next morning. Dale shook my hand. He gave me an envelope, cash, same as every posting, and a sealed letter that he said I should read when I was ready. I put both in my jacket pocket and drove north toward Reno. I opened the letter 3 days later, in a diner, sitting at a counter with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the Pinnacle Staffing Solutions letterhead, but the logo had been modified. The standard corporate wordmark was there, but in the corner, small and precise, was the symbol, the circle with the vertical line. The letter listed my updated credentials, 15 completed postings, 8 protocol adherent shifts at rule-designated sites, clearance level, integrated, and a list of available assignments, ranked by priority. 6 locations, each with a code I recognized from the binder. At the top of the list, deep. Beside the deep listing, where the other entries had geographic regions and status designations, there were only 2 words: "You're ready." That was 5 months ago. I've taken 1 more job since then, a 3-week stint at a signal monitoring station on the coast of Maine that had its own set of rules, its own set of sounds, its own version of the silence window, and its own thing that shouldn't exist but does. I followed the rules. The nights passed, the sun came up, but I haven't called the number for deep. The listing is still available on the board. I check it every few days. The reference code hasn't changed. The posting hasn't been filled. It's waiting for me. It has been waiting for me since before I worked my first night shift 8 years ago. Since before I found the first listing on the first board. Since before I understood that my preference for solitude and darkness and empty buildings wasn't a personality trait, but a qualification. The network needs people like me. People who attend. People who sit in the dark and follow rules and hold the line without needing to understand what the line separates. I am apparently very good at this. I've been doing it for years without knowing that each posting was a step in a progression. Each rule set a level in a training program I never consciously enrolled in. And now I'm at the top of the list. Deep. No location, no description, no classification except the two most frightening words in the English language when applied to something you don't understand. You're ready. I'm not sure I am. I'm not sure anyone is. But I keep checking the listing. I keep looking at the reference code. I keep feeling, in the quiet hours of the night when I'm between postings and the world is still, and the dark presses in through the windows of whatever room I'm renting. The faint subsonic hum that I first noticed at the Lyle Motel, and that has never quite gone away. The hum that lives in my teeth and my wrists and the soft tissue behind my eyes. The carrier frequency of the network, resonating through every site, every threshold, every sealed room and hidden chamber, connecting them all in a geometry I can almost see if I close my eyes and let the hum become a shape. The maintenance must continue, the boundary must hold, and the people who hold it must keep attending night after night, posting after posting, because the alternative is not a world without rules, but a world where the rules have failed, and what was underneath is now on top, and the dark is not empty anymore but full. Impossibly full, with everything that the network has spent decades keeping below the surface. I'm going to call the number for deep. Not tonight, maybe not this week, but soon, because I've read the binder, and I've seen the map, and I've heard the music on the radio that my mother used to hum, and I understand now that I was never choosing these jobs. They were choosing me. Every listing I answered, every posting I completed, every night I sat alone in a room and followed the rules was a step toward the center of a pattern that I am only now beginning to perceive. And the center of that pattern is deep. And deep is where the network either holds or it doesn't. And I am either the kind of person who sits in that chair and attends, or I'm not. I think I am. I think I've always been. And that's the most frightening thing I've ever understood about myself. If you're listening to this, and you've made it this far, and you're the kind of person who recognizes something in what I've described, not the specific details, but the shape of it, the feel of it, the particular quality of being alone in a dark place, and sensing that the dark is not indifferent to your presence, then I want you to know something. There are listings on the board right now. There are postings that need to be filled. The network is always hiring, because the network is always losing people. Not to the things in the rooms or the figures in the parking lots or the voices on the radio. We lose people because they stop attending. They finish a posting and they go back to the regular world and they convince themselves it was nothing. A weird job. A strange 2 weeks. An anecdote they might tell at a party someday. Edited for plausibility. And the site they left goes unattended. And the maintenance lapses. And the hum gets a little louder. And the boundary gets a little thinner. And the next person who takes the posting finds that the rules have changed. One less rule, one more thing that used to be prevented and now simply happens. And the progression continues. So if you feel the pull, answer it. Find the board, read the listings, take the job, follow the rules, sit in the dark and hold the line. Because someone has to, and the network has been waiting for you longer than you think. I know, it waited for me too.